All right, today we are diving deep into the drainage system of Rajasthan. It's a really fascinating, kind of complex topic. So we're going to break it all down using a set of detailed study notes, basically turning them into a visual journey to help you really get how water moves through this incredible landscape. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with some core concepts, the fundamentals. Then we'll classify the rivers into three main systems. After that, we'll zoom in on each one of those systems before we pull it all together with a summary of the most important facts and comparisons. Sound good? Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, we have to build our foundation. To really understand Rajasthan's rivers, we've got to get a handle on two key geographical ideas that pretty much control where all the water ends up going. The first big concept is a watershed. Now, what is that? Well, think of it as a natural divider, like the peak of a roof. It's a high area of land that forces water to flow one way or the other. And for Rajasthan, the two big ones you absolutely have to remember are the Aravalli Range and the Borat Plateau. This little drawing from the notes shows it perfectly. See the peak there at Kumbhalgarh? That's our watershed. Any rain that falls on the left, the western side, is going to flow down towards the Arabian Sea. But any rain on the right, the eastern side, is headed all the way to the Bay of Bengal. Oh, and check out that side note. The Borat Plateau is where most of the state's rivers actually start. That's a super important fact. And the second piece of the puzzle is the catchment area. So if a watershed is the divider, the catchment area is the collector. It's the entire chunk of land that basically acts like a giant funnel, collecting all the rain and groundwater and channeling it into one specific river. Simple enough, right? Okay, so now that we've got those basics down, we can get into the fun part, classification. It turns out all of Rajasthan's rivers can be sorted into three major systems, and it's all based on one simple question: where does the water finally go? And this chart gives us a really clear picture. A whopping 60%, the vast majority, belongs to the inland drainage system. These are rivers that just disappear. They never make it to an ocean. The rest is split between the Bay of Bengal system, which is about 24%, and the Arabian Sea system, clocking in at around 16 to 17%. So what are the big takeaways about this whole system? Well, like we just saw, those inland rivers that just vanish into the desert are the most common type here. The Aravalli Range acts as the state's great watershed, splitting everything up. And this is really critical. Pretty much all of this water depends on the seasonal monsoon rains, which makes it an incredibly fragile and precious resource. This page from the notes gives us an even deeper look. You can see that percentage breakdown we just talked about right at the top. But look down here. The whole system is organized into 15 main river basins, which are then broken down even further into 58 smaller subbasins. This is the framework that scientists and engineers actually use to manage all of the state's water. All right, let's dive into our first major system, the rivers that head west, the ones that eventually make their way to the Arabian Sea. And we have to start with the Luni River. It has this fantastic nickname, Adi Kadi Abi Miti, which means half saline, half sweet. How cool is that? And the reason is, its water starts out totally fresh up in the Nag Hills, but as it flows through the salty desert soil, it gets saltier and saltier until it reaches the Run of Kutch. It's the longest river in the Western Desert, and its whole basin area is known as the Godward region. This hand-drawn map is an amazing visual. Let's actually trace the Luni's journey together. It starts up here in the Nag Hills, and then it flows southwest. As it goes, it gets fed by a whole series of tributaries, first Guhia, then Bundi, Liladi, and so on, all the way down to the Jawai, before it finally disappears into the Run of Kutch. Knowing that sequence is really key to understanding this system. Now let's zoom in on a couple of those tributaries, because they're pretty interesting. The Jochdi is really unique. It's the only one that joins from the right side, and it starts out on the plains, not in the Aravalli Hills like the others. The Bondi, sadly, has earned this unfortunate nickname of a chemical river because of pollution. And then there's the Jawai, which is absolutely crucial because it feeds the Jawai Dam. People call it the lifeline of Marwar. Next up in the Arabian Sea system, we have the Mahi River. It's sometimes called the Ganga of southern Rajasthan. Now, what's so special about the Mahi is its path. It actually enters Rajasthan from the south, makes this really sharp U-turn, and then flows back south into Gujarat. It's also a perennial river, meaning it has water in it all year round. And that wild U-shaped path leads to this. This is the crucial point. This is one of the most famous facts in all of Indian geography. The Mahi is the only river in India that crosses the Tropic of Cancer twice. That's an amazing piece of trivia right there. The Mahi is also incredibly important for the whole region. I mean, looking at the notes on the left here, you can see these huge projects like the Sujalam Suflam Water Initiative. And over on the right, we see its main tributaries, the Som and Jakam. Now, this is key. The Jakam Dam at 81 meters isn't just some dam on a small river. It is the highest dam in the entire state of Rajasthan. To round out the Arabian Sea system, we've got two last rivers, the Western Banas and the Sabarmati. What's interesting is that both of them start in Rajasthan, but they actually spend most of their time flowing through Gujarat. The main thing to remember here is to connect them to the big cities on their banks. Abu is on the Western Banas, while Ahmedabad and the capital, Gandhinagar, are on the Sabarmati. Okay, now we're moving on to the biggest system by far, the one that covers 60% of the state's drainage, the inland system. These are those rivers that disappear. They start in Rajasthan and they end in Rajasthan, often just vanishing into the desert sand or emptying into a saltwater lake. It's pretty wild. The absolute star of the inland system is the Ghaggar River. It starts way up in the Himalayas and usually just kind of peters out into the sand near Patna Fort. But, and this is the amazing part, when there's a really strong monsoon, this river can flood so much that its water actually flows across the border and reaches Fort Abbas in Pakistan. That's why it gets the title of Rajasthan's only international river. And historically, it's so important. Ancient civilizations like Kalibanga grew up right on its banks. So, from the rivers that disappear, we're now turning to our final category, the rivers that flow east. These are the ones that join up with the massive river systems of the Gangetic Plain, and eventually, their water makes it all the way to the Bay of Bengal. The main artery of this whole eastern system is the mighty Chambal River. People call it the Kamdanu of Rajasthan, and it is the state's longest river overall. It's famous for a couple of things. One is the intense gully erosion that creates these rugged, dramatic landscapes. And two, it's home to the state's highest waterfall, the beautiful Chulia Falls. The Chambal is also a total powerhouse for hydroelectricity and irrigation. Let's just follow the river's path for a second. There are 4 huge dams built one after the other. The first one is Gandhi Sagar, which is actually in Madhya Pradesh. Then, as the river enters Rajasthan, it hits Rana Pratap Sagar, then Javahar Sagar, and finally the Kota Barrage, which is mostly used to divert water for irrigation. Woof! Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, so let's take a minute and just consolidate everything with a quick summary. We'll focus on the key facts and comparisons that are the most important ones to lock in. So, if we ask the question, which river collects water from the biggest chunk of the state? In other words, the largest catchment area, this bar chart gives us a super clear answer. The Banas River is number 1, covering more than 24% of Rajasthan's total area. That's followed by the Luni and then the Chambal. And this final table, this is basically your ultimate cheat sheet. It's packed with those high-value facts. Geographically, Bikaner and Churu are the only districts with 0 rivers. For length inside Rajasthan, the Banas takes the crown. The Luni has the most subbasins, with 12. And for just the sheer volume of water, the Chambal is the undisputed champion. These are the kinds of facts that really stick with you. And we'll end with a really critical thought for the future. We've seen again and again how these river systems depend so heavily on the seasonal monsoon rains. So, the big question we're left with is, as our climate keeps changing, what's that going to mean for the future of these absolutely vital and often very fragile lifelines of Rajasthan?